Welcome to another edition of the No Dams Given podcast. We're here today with, and I've already said so that's the other thing that we put out a short clip of like one of the very first ones that we did, and you have to go back and listen to yourself on these things. Otherwise, you put in a whole bunch of nonverbal stuff and, well, really verbal stuff that you don't realize you do that's just filler. Like, and so trying to kind of learn about that stuff. Anyway, Matthew Kulinski's here. He is the Director Communications for the Department of Agriculture, and we're very excited to have him. But before we get started, please hit the subscribe button if you enjoy the podcast. We've made it over a year of episodes now.
Wow.
I have my favorite model here, and Miss Abby McIntosh. Abby, show them your T-shirt. Mm-hmm. We've got some new point of sale down at the brewery, so please come down. This will probably air after Christmas, so we'll have after Christmas sales going on for our pre-Christmas parties or our pre-Christmas point of sale, and let's get started. So our goal has always been to support organic agriculture, sustainable farming, natural resource management. We started out as a farm, and moving forward, that's what we've tried to do. With every glass of beer that we sell in the state of Georgia, we want to promote, Georgia agriculture, specifically Great. Southwest Georgia agriculture, help people think about farming differently, try to make farm products healthier, try to at least educate people on acceptable or promote good use of natural resources. And that's why I think our partnership has been such a great one with Georgia Grown and Georgia Department of Agriculture. So tell people a little bit about the Georgia Grown program and how that relates to us and why a brewery is, why a brewery turns out to be Georgia Grown.
Sure. So I operate as the Deputy Director of Marketing for the Georgia Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Agriculture does a number of different marketing programs. And Georgia Grown has been one of those programs that I've had the privilege to be able to work on the creation of, on the redevelopment of, and then manage over the last roughly 8 years. And the major goal of Georgia Grown is it's an economic development program. Our main goal is to help farmers make more money. We want to keep more money in the agriculture economy, and we want to help Georgia grow. So part of our funding does come from state taxpayer dollars. So we've got to show results and that we're increasing sales. But luckily, it's a program that I feel like no matter what part of the state you're from or what your political background is or affiliations are, you can support supporting farmers. So Georgia Grown works with very small farmers to very large farmers to processors to producers to ancillary organizations and companies that work with the ag industry. And we've really tried to build this network of everyone involved in the agriculture industry, from the restaurants to the farmers to the brewers to the wineries, agritourism destinations, everyone around the state, so that we can promote these agricultural products, so that we can increase sales of agricultural products, and that we can provide some sort of expertise and assistance and partnership for these businesses to help them grow and stay in Georgia. So it's fantastic being able to have a partner like Pretoria being part of the Georgia Grown program, because not only do you work with farmers to grow the product, but you provide a value add to it, which is a key part in the economic development advantages of agriculture. Is having that value add gives a huge boost to the economic production of the state and of the agricultural products that we have. But in addition to that, you're then able to keep the money in the state. Georgia consumers that want to craft beer are able to find a product that's using Georgia farmers and having it come from the state. So that's what we really enjoy working with Pretoria.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Well, we have too, and it's a huge selling component for us. I mean, we're a really small brewery. I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, the big guys, we have a very large brewery here, Miller Coors, and they do 400,000 barrels a month. And kudos to them. They're if not one of the best breweries in the world. They make the same products over and over and over again, and they make them consistently. So we don't consider ourselves competition to them, but we're not going to do well if we're not telling our story.
Right.
I mean, our story is that Dad and I were sitting on our farm and trying to do something other than corn, cotton, and peanuts, and we wanted to have value added to the farm products. We wanted to have a small brewery out on our farm out in Dougherty County, and it turned into a much bigger project in downtown Albany. But having this partnership with Georgia Grown has really expanded that and opened doors for us. Great. And I assume that's part of what y'all do for everyone.
Sure. I guess it's an economic development program. Okay. And we look at economic development a little bit differently than maybe traditional economic development. A lot of times economic developers across the country go around trying to attract large companies to relocate to their areas, and we kind of think of it as kind of like they're hunting these woolly mammoths, right? They're going out to get these large kills and bring them back. We prefer kind of this new, it's a bit of a buzzword thing out there, but it fits well with agriculture, and that's economic gardening. What can we do to create help the small businesses in our state to create the atmosphere so that they can grow well? And that's going to take, removing barriers. It's going to take tilling that soil. It's going to mean removing whether they're legal barriers or business barriers that are there, economic barriers to their growth. But then also providing them with some of the water and fertilizer and things that they need in order to grow as they develop. And, you're going to deal with a company that starts from a seed, a small company, very differently than you are a plant that's already in its growth. But we want to be able to provide those services, that networking, really whatever we can do to help those businesses grow in the state. And I think the state's going to be better off long-term for that. There's only so many companies out there that are looking to relocate, and every state's competing after them. Right. So we need to pay more attention to the smaller businesls that are here and help them grow. And agriculture is the biggest industry in the state. So that's the logical group to kind of push.
Still the biggest industry in the state.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and as far as how we've moved forward, it's important for people to understand that it's not enough to have a good product. I mean, that's why our relationship is so important. It's not enough to have a good product because there are a lot of good products out there. You got to tell the story of your product, and you got to be able to put it in front of people, and you got to be able to put it in front of people in the right places at the right price. And Georgia Grown has helped with that. I mean, what are some of the challenges y'all have had over the past year or 2 years?
All types of challenges. Talking from the agriculture industry in general. One of the biggest challenges that our farmers have right now is economic and trade related. So there's a lot of very cheap product that's being brought into Georgia from Mexico and outside the country. And our farmers are having difficulty competing with them. Their labor's lower, their food safety standards are lower, their regulations are lower in that regards, and it's just tougher for our quality products to compete with their low-priced products in these large retail atmospheres.
And let me say something about that from the medical point of view. So if it's coming from China, it's coming from outside of the United States, probably has heavy metal contamination, and that is just a truism. One of the things that we've looked at are CBD products from China. They all have mercury, lead, and arsenic in it. They're a third world country still. Well, I don't know technically what they are, but they act like a third world country because they are not clean in their production practices. Same thing from Mexico. They can use chemicals that we can't use that maybe we would complain about, but from a health standpoint, we're not complaining about because it just make us sicker. So helping people to understand that particular component of it, I guess, is part of what we're trying to do. It's part of what this podcast tries to do.
So international trade becomes a big issue. And it used to be the Mexican growers would not sell their product at the same time that American products are in season. So like Georgia blueberries wouldn't face competition from Mexico. Sweet corn wouldn't face competition. Yellow squash would not face competition. But just recently, in the last 10 or even 5 years, we've seen South American countries, particularly Mexico, really dumping product at the same time on top of our Georgia seasons. And it makes it very difficult for our farmers to compete. A lot of times this Mexican product is subsidized in different ways in addition to having those lower standards and regulations. So one of the goals of Georgia Grown then would be to explain that story to consumers.
Right.
Make sure they know the benefits of supporting their local farmer to supporting their rural areas. Understanding the quality of the product that's being produced in Georgia and how it is going to be better and better for you than product coming from other countries as well. And, that doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to buy locally. We don't produce blueberries year round. We don't produce, yellow squash year round. But when it is in season and it is local, buy it.
Right.
The challenge kind of goes through the supply chain. So part of it is the product that's being imported. But we need to do a better job of talking to the large retailers that control most of the grocery sector in the country. To be able to better identify where that product's coming from. So if they are getting in Georgia squash, that they identify it as being Georgia squash so that those consumers can buy it.
Right. Like Vidalia onions.
Like Vidalia onions.
Yeah.
That's a great point because Georgia has a really exceptional history of marketing their agricultural products. Yeah. Two of the most popular agricultural brands in the country come from Georgia, and that's Vidalia onions and Georgia peaches. Yep. People all across the United States know about that. So we've got this amazing foundation set in agricultural marketing, and it's something that we can build off of in promoting our other commodities, getting those sold outside of the state of Georgia, but also making sure that the new residents that come into Atlanta and the new residents in the state know what's being grown in Georgia, when those are available, and how to buy them.
Right. And some of the non-traditional products that we're working on, Georgia hops, Georgia hemp,
right.
As soon as we can get it legal, Georgia hemp, Georgia barley.
Yep.
So we've, in the 1970s, there were barley allotments for the state of Georgia, and they went away when the production processes changed, and they stopped buying the large brewers stopped buying local grains. But we spent 2 or 3 years now working with the University of Georgia to recreate some local Georgia barley production.
Wonderful.
And 2 of our beers will be 80% Georgia grown this year.
Fantastic.
Because most barley, most of the product for beer is barley. So, so that's pretty neat. You're not just Georgia as far as your marketing though. You're marketing state, Germany, wherever, worldwide, right?
Right. So we have a domestic marketing program where we work on taking Georgia agricultural products and bringing them to trade shows and finding other retail outlets of them domestically in the United States. There's also an international trade component where we have inbound and outbound trade missions where we take our local agricultural products and bring them out there. But part of that economic gardening message is how do we get companies like a Pretoria, if y'all were interested in exporting, what are the guidance? Oh, wonderful. So, what are those services? What's the education? What are those things that we can provide to you, that training to kind of get you up to that point to become export ready,
right?
So that you would then be ready to go off to some of these trade shows. The last thing we'd want to do is send you to a trade show in the Middle East without any understanding of that market, of how to export there, of how you're going to get your product there, the logistics of it. So right now we're building some of that educational foundation for our Georgia Grown members to kind of get them to be able to grow and export, because that's really where Georgia's going to succeed. We grow and produce fantastic products that can compete internationally, especially in terms of quality. Other countries see that as a product that they want. Almost every country around the world looks at American produce and American food items as being the highest quality and setting the highest standards, something that they want. So how do we get that product to meet that high demand and be able to export more of those products out there?
Is it hard to get involved for the farmer, the producer in Georgia Grown? What do they have to do?
Oh, yeah. So it's easy. You go to georgiagrown.com. Great plug there. And they can sign up to become a member. When the program was first started 8 years ago, we didn't receive any state funding for the Georgia Grown program. So most of the funding had to come through membership dues. So to become a member, you pay either $100 up to $2,500, depending on the size of your company. Most of our members pay only $100, and it's an annual fee, and you can become a full member of Georgia Grown, which lets you use the logo at the heart of it, but also allows you to become part of these domestic marketing programs, networking events. We have a symposium coming up in February, early February. You can find more information at georgiagrown.com on that one and be able to learn from some of the other agricultural businesses around the state. So it's really easy. You just sign up online. But that is one of those different things. Other state branding programs don't require a membership. They get excessive state funding, and they don't have to raise money that way. But we found it's been kind of an advantage to charge a fee, because it has our members have to put their skin in the game. They got to hold our feet to the fire, make sure that they're receiving services, and we kind of use that as a performance measure. You know, if we're losing members, we know we're doing something wrong. So we always need to be getting new members as well as renewing members.
With that said, y'all have events throughout the state, throughout the year, correct?
Yeah, so we'll have symposiums. We've got educational events. We also have opportunities for our members to sell products directly to the public. I just came from one 2 weeks ago at the Shops at River Crossing in Macon. Fantastic event. We had 36 vendors there. We were set up in a tent outside there. We estimate roughly 2,500 shoppers came by on a Saturday afternoon. So we have opportunities throughout the year, at least once a month, for our members to.
It's time to do another one at the brewery, right?
That's right. That's
Victoria
right.
Fields.
Yeah, that was one of our networking events that we had, where we simply invite the Georgia Grown members and other people involved in agriculture, interested in agriculture, to come in and talk and meet the commissioner and just kind of hang out.
That's right.
So that was
Commissioner
wonderful.
Black was here for that particular one.
Yeah,
gave a nice little plug. So
yeah.
It was good. We'll have to get them out to the farm next year.
Yeah.
Maybe when something's coming in season.
I think one of the important things that Georgia Grown does, and I think Pretoria has been very good at, and we kind of want to be able to model with other Georgia Grown companies, is one of the other challenges we run into is that anyone who's been in the state of Georgia for a while knows that the state can be somewhat divided, whether that's politically, red and blue, whether that's rural versus urban, or suburban versus urban. And luckily, we've been able to see that agriculture and Georgia Grown and farming is one of those few things, beer, that kind of bridges that gap in the state of Georgia and can kind of bring everybody together.
That's a good point. Yeah,
and that's something that we want to use Georgia Grown for. And it takes more than putting a logo on there, but it takes an eagerness to talk to the other side, you know, in a way. And Pretoria's done a good job of that. You have a product that's made here in Albany, but you're not scared to take it to Atlanta and try to sell it there, and maybe talk in a different voice to a Atlanta or an urban population, but also be something that comes from rural Georgia and is successful down here too.
Yeah, well, we want to be original to our story, and people
that's
to
right.
understand, and people to understand what it means to grow something here. It's a little more. It's not a little. It's quite a bit more expensive to take and vertically integrate a product from dirt to glass.
Yeah.
And so And so for people to understand that, and we think that adds quality, it adds taste. Part of taste itself is experience. And so by helping people to understand what we're doing, we're creating an experience around what they're doing. So you pay a little bit more and enjoy it a little bit more, I hope.
Yeah, but definitely the aspect of working in a rural area, taking kind of that rural product, but still being able to message in it, that story works.
Change it,
with the urban consumer as well as the rural consumer, and it kind of brings all those values together.
Well, and for us to be successful, we have to be able to penetrate Atlanta to a certain extent. I mean, you look at Georgia's, being from South Georgia my whole life, we think of South Georgians think of Georgia as Georgia and Atlanta.
Yeah.
And it's probably, there's about 6 million people within the Beltway, and there's about 6 million people outside the Beltway. But if you think about it, there's only 6 million people in Alabama.
Right.
So we're in Alabama. We love Alabama. Not to say anything bad about that. But it's just, there's a state within a state right there. And it's not, obviously not rural. And so how do we get in there and do a good job with it, and I hope and think that this relationship has done that, or is helping to do that.
Yeah, and to be able to use that as a model with other agricultural products in the state, because we run into farmers and ag producers all the time that either they simply make their product and don't want to deal with the marketing or selling of it. And that's something that they can't do anymore. You know, if you're selling to a McDonald's or a Subway, they're going to want your picture and to be able to sell you as a farmer as part of their messaging and story. So farmers have had to market themselves in ways that they've never had to in the past. People care about where their onions are coming from, or where their beer comes from,
or where their beef,
all of those
milk,
things, right?
Everything, yeah.
And so we need to work with the agriculture industry to get them to message themselves and work on their messaging and their story, just like Pretoria, so that a urban consumer that has no background in agriculture understands it and understands their difficulties in growing that product, and how they grow it and how they choose to grow it. And that becomes one of those challenges that we try to bridge.
Yeah. Where else? What are some of the non-traditional things that you wouldn't necessarily think Georgia Grown does?
Well, I was thinking of some of the products actually you were talking about earlier. Well, there's beers, and then just this morning I had a Bestie Satsuma Orange. I don't know if you've seen those, but Corbett Farms at Eccles County is now created a brand called Besties, and they're able to market and sell these small Satsuma oranges like a clementine type thing, and they have been able to sell them out, so you can find them in almost any Publix or Kroger or Walmart now, and you look for the Georgia Grown logo. So the clementine mandarin oranges that we're used to buying around the fall seasons in the state usually are either coming from California or from Mexico or Spain. Well, now there's enough production of those in Georgia that you can buy them from Georgia. So you'd want to look for that Georgia Grown logo on that Besties label. There's plenty of other farms now selling that citrus too, all over South Georgia, that you can get via mail order, but there's people doing some great grapefruits now and lemons. Things that you would never expect Georgia to be big producers of. And a lot of that comes back to UGA, developing new varieties and growing practices that allow us to grow that citrus.
And I don't know if I was told, but I don't know if it's this hearsay, but because of the hurricane, people lost a ton of their pecan trees and pecan orchards, and so they've been looking at other things like satsumas to replace those with. We did a sour beer with some of the satsumas from Camilla.
Oh, wonderful!
And so Todd White actually introduced us to that contact. Farmer Frito with Flint River Fresh has been a good source of local farmers and farm products, and we've had a relationship. I'm doing a bunch of plugs now with Jay Moore Farms.
Wonderful, yeah, that's great.
Up in up in y'all's neck of the woods.
Right. Well, that's a perfect example of what we tried to do with Georgia Grown. Doug Mabry with the Georgia Wineries uses the term economic cross-pollination.
Yes.
And that's what Pretoria's been very good
Yes.
at doing, is how can you work with these other farmers and
That's
businesses
exactly right.
to be able to sell stuff? And then if they open a retail location, I would hope that they would sell the Pretoria beer in their retail locations and in their communities, because
Sure.
their ingredients are being used to make it.
And we hope that we can encourage other Georgia breweries to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
I think Creature Comfort in Athens has done, and they'll constantly put up on their social media where they're getting their local products from for their beers. So they started before we did, so they've taken the reins of that.
Yeah.
But having others buy grains from people, now that we've got local farmers that want to produce Georgia grains, well, let's get other breweries to use those and malt them from. And then maybe eventually we'll get somebody to invest in a maltster, so we don't have to ship it to North Carolina. Although they've been good partners to ship it back, and all of that stuff to create sort of that local environment to build and promote our partners and promote this idea of a collective.
Right. And that's going to be how Georgia succeeds, or how we should handle rural development, is in building these networks and this foundation of a bunch of small businesses that are out there that are all able to work together to be able to allow South Georgia to prosper. Because that is one of the challenges that we run into, and one of the goals of Georgia Grown is the rural parts of the state are not doing as well as the city is. Yeah. And what we need to do is figure out not only how to create that economic development opportunities in the rural area, but also how to educate the urban parts of the state that the rural parts are important, and that we get things from them and are productive, and that we need policies to benefit them. And I think that's a message coming as a native Atlantan, born and raised there, that the Atlanta community would be happy to listen to. It's just it hasn't been quite as made as much. We spend too much time talking in our own bubbles than to be able to communicate with each other, to share our problems and our feelings, and be able to come up with those common solutions. Yeah,
and that small business, we're a small manufacturing company.
That's right.
And so it takes we're taking Georgia grown products and creating them into something else, and then selling them in Georgia for the most part. And that's how you actually create wealth and create additional jobs, and that capital goes back in both the farmers and our employees and the other employees, and as well people get to enjoy the products. So awesome. Not even related, you may not know, but do you think the trade agreements that I think they've negotiated, is that going to help at all?
I don't know the details. We may not be able to answer that until 10, 20 years down the line, even, how those happen. What I do know is that Georgia farmers are exceptionally resilient and smart, so that they'll be able to, if they need to change a product that they're growing or something, they'll be able to do that, and they'll compete well. The problem is when we do have trade with a country like Mexico that is subsidizing a product or sending in inferior product to compete with Georgia grown products.
Sure.
Yeah. That was a big hit on not only yellow squash, but blueberries is a good example. Georgia grows a large amount of blueberries, and I bet you most Atlanta consumers don't know that. So they don't know to look for the Georgia grown berries in the local.
And we've expanded. We're expanding. That's one of the things that is growing in South Georgia. Farmers are continuing to put them in. There's a nice market for blueberries and Georgia blueberries.
Yep.
It's labor intensive, but there's a good profit margin on it. So
when the weather's good.
Right. So that's been a good thing. We're actually expanding ours this year. We went from 3 acres to I think about 7 acres.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Which is big. I mean, our farm's certified organic. So we have those issues that are associated with it. So so we can't get too big, or the labor component becomes too much. But
that's right.
And then everything that we use from the farm goes right back into. We bought everything from the farm at the brewery, and then made beer out of it this past year.
That's great.
Pretty cool.
But we'll need to make sure that you have plenty of markets out there. When
Right.
you have excess product that you need to be be able to sell those, because really you should be able to sell those blueberries easily. I mean, there is a demand for that local product.
Sure.
One of the messages,
farmers
markets, but even retail, it's just what we always try to explain to farmers is a lot of times they plant something and then they try to market it. And what we try to tell them to is you got to be able to know you can market something before you plant it, right?
Yeah.
So there is a lot of farmers out there, especially in produce, that are growing all kind of the same things. And of course, that's going to be tougher to sell. The more you can branch out and try to find new things to sell, the better you're going to do.
Right.
And there's tons of restaurants and retailers around the country that are looking for some of those more unique products that would pay a premium for them if you just kind of grew something a little bit different. So that's part of that messaging that we try to get out there.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure.
I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it. Yeah, it's been 40 minutes, so that
that's
that was really fast.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'd love to have you back. We appreciate the relationship with Georgia Grown. To end with, hopefully we'll have you back and we'll talk about hemp when that's. How do we market that and be the best hemp producing state?
Absolutely, we have the farmers to do that, so that would be exciting.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Perfect.